We live in a world where everything happens too quickly. Worries accumulate, work pressure doesn't disappear, and the feeling of always being busy has become normal. But what if there existed a path to recover calm without needing to flee from the modern world? If you have ever felt trapped in thoughts that don't stop, in anxiety that doesn't let you enjoy the present, you are not alone. Buddhism teaches us that peace is not found externally, but in the way we face life. Through its principles, it is possible to reduce anxiety without letting stress control us. In this video, we will explore how Buddha's ancient knowledge can help you live with more tranquility. Stay until the end and discover how small changes can make a great difference in your daily well-being. The weight of anxiety in contemporary life. Anxiety has become a constant in modern life. It's difficult to find someone who doesn't feel, at some moment of the day, overwhelmed by worries that stalk us from all fronts. From work stress to social pressure, external demands seem endless, but beyond commitments, there's internal noise, that sensation of being trapped in a torrent of thoughts that never cease. Today we live with our heads full of demands that don't stop, like a kind of constant urgency that never turns off. Social media bombards us with apparently perfect lives while work and personal responsibilities demand more from us each day. Anxiety, therefore, doesn't only present itself as an emotional ailment, it becomes a physical burden that affects our health. When we think about stress's impact, it's common to associate it with evident symptoms like insomnia, constant fatigue, or irritability that sometimes we don't know where it comes from. The reality is that stress affects both our mind and our body. This condition can generate serious physical disorders if not managed adequately. Anxiety transforms into a cycle of exhaustion where we feel incapable of escaping the whirlwind of thoughts and occupations that spin endlessly. For example, the constant pressure to reach productivity standards at work or on social media can make us feel inadequate. Living in a state of anxiety leads us to feel like we're always running but never arriving anywhere. This constant sensation of being adrift affects us profoundly, both in our capacity to enjoy the present and in our ability to relate authentically with others. Furthermore, the future is a concept that generates much unease. Worry about what's to come, about what could go wrong, becomes a constant obstacle to living fully. Expectations of what we should be or do feed this anxiety, and in the end, we find ourselves trapped in a spiral of worry and emotional exhaustion. Modern life has pushed us to live in a state of permanent alert, and this is where suffering begins. But it's precisely this suffering that invites us to reflect and eventually seek paths to free ourselves from the anxiety that afflicts us so much. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more insights on bringing peace and mindfulness into your everyday life. Buddha's teachings for liberation from anxiety. In its profound wisdom, Buddhism offers us valuable teachings that can help us reduce anxiety. One of Buddhism's key principles is the understanding of impermanence, anicca. According to this teaching, everything we experience, whether thoughts, emotions, or external situations, is transitory. Nothing remains the same forever. By understanding that both circumstances and mental states are ephemeral, we begin to release the pressure of wanting to control everything, which often feeds our anxiety. When we face an anxious thought or feeling, one of the first reactions we usually have is to try to avoid it, ignore it, or flee from it. But true Buddhist wisdom invites us to accept and observe. Instead of fighting against our anxious thoughts, we can simply allow them to be. Buddha teaches us that the constant struggle to reject painful experiences only generates more suffering. When we resist what we're feeling, we feed it. We make it bigger. Instead, by accepting our anxiety, by recognizing it without judgment, we begin to diminish its power over us. In Buddhism's context, attachment, tanha, is another important cause of suffering. We cling to things we believe will give just satisfaction or security, our relationships, our achievements, our expectations about the future. But this attachment is a trap, because everything is impermanent. The things we love or the goals we pursue are not always under our control. This detachment doesn't mean we stop caring for what we value, but that we understand happiness doesn't depend on a specific outcome. Freeing ourselves from this attachment allows us to live with more peace and less anxiety. For example, we often live with anxiety about what might happen in the future. We obsess over what should happen or with the fear that things will go wrong. Buddha invites us to free ourselves from that burden and live more fully in the present. Instead of worrying about the future, we can focus on what's happening now in this precise moment. The practice of mindfulness helps us be conscious of what's happening in the here and now, thus reducing anxiety about what hasn't yet arrived. The concept of suffering, dukkha, is also essential for understanding anxiety's root. According to Buddhist teachings, Buddha taught us that suffering is an inevitable part of human life and that the expectations we have about how things should be often generate frustration and anxiety. When we accept that suffering is part of the human experience, we can free ourselves from the idea that we must avoid it at all costs. This acceptance isn't resignation, but an invitation to see difficulties with a new perspective, as opportunities for growth and learning. Instead of seeing anxiety as something that must be eradicated immediately, Buddhism encourages us to see it as a signal, a wake-up call about something that needs to be observed, understood, and finally released. Each time we experience anxiety, it's as if it's telling us, here is something you must let go. The practice of Buddhist wisdom is learning to see anxious thoughts with clarity, without identifying with them or being carried away by them. Instead of fighting, we learn to let go. A fundamental aspect of Buddhist teachings is compassion, both toward oneself and toward others. Anxiety, like other difficult emotions, is often accompanied by a sense of judgment toward ourselves. Why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? But Buddha teaches that true healing comes when we treat ourselves with kindness. Instead of criticizing and rejecting our own emotions, practicing self-compassion is essential for overcoming anxiety. When we allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling without self-reproach, we give space for healing. These teachings may seem simple, but they are profoundly transformative. They invite us to live with more acceptance and less struggle, to free ourselves from fear of the future, and to cultivate an inner peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Meditation techniques for reducing anxiety. Buddhism offers a great quantity of practices that can help us deal with anxiety. Among these practices, meditation is one of the most powerful and accessible tools when it comes to reducing stress and anxiety. Meditation allows us to pause in the mental whirlwind and restore a sensation of tranquility and control. But how exactly can meditation be effective? First, mindfulness meditation is one of the most recommended practices. This technique consists of being completely present in the moment, observing thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations without judging them. This means accepting everything that arises in our mind without trying to change it or react to it. Mindfulness practice teaches us not to identify with thoughts, but to simply observe them as they are. This creates a healthy distance between us and our anxieties. For example, when practicing mindfulness, you can sit in a quiet place and concentrate on your breathing. While inhaling and exhaling, observe the physical and mental sensations associated with each breath. When your thoughts begin to wander, and they will, simply observe them without engaging with them. Recognize the thought as just a thought, and return your attention to breathing. Over time, this practice helps diminish the intensity of anxious thoughts as you learn to treat them with more lightness and less emotional involvement. One of the advantages of practicing mindfulness is that it can be done at any time and in any place. You don't need a special room or ideal conditions. Even during a work break or while walking to public transport, you can practice mindfulness by bringing your mind back to the present. By doing so, you begin to interrupt the constant cycle of anxious thoughts that arise when we're worried about the future or the past. Another highly effective technique is visualization. During visualization, you can imagine a relaxing scenario like a tranquil beach, a serene forest, or any place that gives you a sensation of peace. The key here is to use all your senses. Imagine the colors, sounds, smells, and even textures that surround you. By completely immersing yourself in a peaceful environment, your mind begins to move away from anxiety sources. This practice creates a mental refuge you can turn to each time you need a break from stress. For example, imagine you're experiencing a wave of anxiety. By beginning to visualize your tranquil beach, you can feel the soft breeze on your face, hear the sound of waves hitting the sand, and feel the cool sand under your feet. As you immerse yourself more in that scenario, your anxiety begins to diminish. This practice not only helps relieve stress, but also cultivates a deep feeling of well-being. A technique that also stands out is loving-kindness meditation, or Metta. This practice consists of generating feelings of love and kindness, first toward oneself and then toward others. Through repetition of phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be at peace, may I be healthy," you begin to soften your mind and increase your compassion both for yourself and for others. By generating feelings of love, your mind moves away from anxiety since the focus becomes kindness rather than worry. It may seem difficult, especially when we're trapped in an anxiety cycle, but Metta practice teaches us to cultivate a kinder and more compassionate vision of ourselves. This technique is especially useful for dealing with emotions like anger or frustration that often accompany anxiety. By nurturing feelings of kindness and acceptance, we weaken the power of negative emotions. Additionally, we can integrate deep breathing techniques into our meditation practice. Deep breathing helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for decreasing heart rate and relaxing the body. When we feel anxiety, our breathing tends to become shallow and rapid. By focusing on slow, deep breathing, we can quickly relieve anxiety's physical symptoms while also helping to calm our mind. Practicing these meditation techniques regularly not only helps reduce anxiety, but also contributes to developing a more serene and focused mind. Over time, you'll become more capable of interrupting anxious thought patterns and cultivating a state of tranquility, even in stressful situations. These practices aren't immediate solutions, but with persistence and patience, they become powerful tools on the path toward a more balanced life. How to apply these teachings in daily life? The key to overcoming anxiety doesn't lie in applying principles and techniques in isolation, but in integrating them into our daily life. The true power of Buddhist teachings and meditation is in how we use them outside a formal practice context. The goal is not only to find calm in moments of retreat, but to be capable of maintaining that inner peace even in the midst of daily chaos. One of the most effective ways to incorporate Buddhism's principles into daily life is to begin by cultivating awareness of the present moment in all activities we perform. Often we live our lives automatically, with our mind trapped in thoughts of the past or worries about the future, without realizing what we're really doing in the moment. When we begin practicing mindfulness, we're no longer simply spectators of our lives. We become conscious participants. For example, when eating, instead of doing it quickly or while distracted with the phone, we can take a moment to savor each bite, feel the food's texture, and be entirely present in that experience. This simple practice of being attentive to what we're doing helps us break with the constant cycle of anxious thoughts. The key is making mindfulness a habit, a way of living, not just a technique practiced in meditation sessions. Another way to apply these principles in daily life is to make an effort to reduce attachment to results. As we mentioned before, attachment is one of the main sources of suffering. We cling to expectations about how things should turn out, and when these expectations aren't met, we feel disappointed or anxious. Instead of focusing solely on results, we can practice detachment and center ourselves on the process itself. For example, if you're working on an important project, instead of obsessing over the final result, you can concentrate on doing your part with the best possible attitude, without rushing or letting worries about the future cloud your performance. This approach reduces internal pressure and allows anxiety to diminish, since we're not so focused on what could go wrong. This helps us live more fluidly, without constant worry about results that are outside our control. Additionally, it's important to learn to release expectations about others. In our society, we often place high expectations on how others should behave, which can generate frustration and anxiety when those expectations aren't met. For example, we can feel anxiety when our friends or family don't respond as we expect, or when social interactions don't turn out as we imagined. Buddhism teaches us to accept people as they are, without trying to force them to fulfill our desires or expectations. This doesn't mean we should be indifferent, but that we should learn to release rigid expectations and accept the impermanence of all situations and relationships. The simple act of taking time for oneself is another essential step for applying these principles. Living with constant anxiety can make us forget to care for our mental and emotional health. Dedicating a few minutes each day to disconnect, taking a brief walk, listening to music, or simply sitting in silence allows us to restore our energy. Just like a phone that needs recharging, our mind and body also require rest. Meditation practice, though very useful, can also include daily activities like taking a relaxing bath or reading a book without hurry. At work or in social situations, when we're presented with challenges or stressful moments, we can use deep breathing techniques to help us maintain calm. For example, when we feel anxiety beginning to accumulate at work or during a difficult conversation, we can pause and focus on deep breathing. We inhale slowly through the nose, hold the air for a few seconds, and exhale slowly through the mouth. This simple act of focusing on breathing helps us reduce tension and take control of our mind. Implementing these practices doesn't mean we'll never experience anxiety or stress. Life continues presenting challenges, but the change is in our capacity to face them with a more balanced mind. Over time, as we cultivate the practice of mindfulness and detachment, our response to stress becomes more serene. Anxious thoughts stop having so much power over us, and we can see them with more clarity for what they are. Just transitory thoughts, not absolute reality. Conclusion. Anxiety is a natural human reaction, but you don't have to live trapped in it. Buddhism offers us a clear path toward inner freedom, where mental peace doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on our capacity to manage our thoughts and emotions. As you immerse yourself in these practices, remember that true change is achieved with patience and perseverance. You have the power to change your relationship with anxiety, and that change begins with a single step toward calm. If this video has been useful to you, I invite you to give it a like, share it with someone who could benefit from these practices, and subscribe to the channel for more content about well-being, personal growth, and ancestral wisdom. Thank you for being here, and for taking the time to explore these teachings. I encourage you to take a moment right now to breathe deeply, and remember that although difficulties will always be present, you always have the capacity to face them with a tranquil mind. Until next time. With gratitude, Daily Dharma.